Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sparty Lab podcast. I am so excited to be here with a researcher who I've never met before, Dr. Domna Banakou. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, Banakou, it's correct.
Banakou. And you're joining us from Barcelona. You're a postdoc at the University of Barcelona in the event lab, right?
That's correct. Yes, that's true. Thank you for having me here today. Pretty happy to join you.
Yeah, it's great to know you in this format. I have known you on paper for years because you write some really interesting research papers. So especially about the Proteus effect and avatar effects. So can you give us a little history on how you got into this research?
Sure, of course. To be honest, it all started when I was still doing my bachelor's degree in Greece. So I studied computer science and informatics, and my background is on that and computer graphics. And since I got into the world of computer graphics and virtual reality back then, I started reading a little bit more on what can be done. And I came across all these interesting studies published by then by Professor Slater and Professor Bailenson from Stanford. So I got really attracted by the idea of working in virtual reality, and had also done my very first sort of project. It was just a little project on what happens when you are represented in online virtual worlds using a different type of body, inspired by all this work that I had read about. And slowly, this led me to pursuing a master's degree in computer graphics, get more into virtual reality. And then, of course, this is I did my master's degree at UCL, and at the time, Professor Slater was also teaching there. And then I did my my final master's thesis with him and Dr. Sylvia Pan. And one thing led to another, and I ended up doing a PhD with Professor Slater. And this is
So that's kind of like
where I am today.
It's a little bit of a jump from the computer science side to the psychology side, but you saw the synergy there.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's really a combination of many different disciplines. So it was great for me to be involved with people, with scientists coming from different backgrounds, and expand my knowledge a bit further than computer science. Yes, right now I'm not really I have ended up not doing anything on the computers science side, although I do get involved in the implementation of virtual reality experiences. That's as far as
sure. But it's such a useful background. I think people with the hard technical skills then come into the social science, and they're able to create stimuli. You've got multiple studies in which people are embodying avatars, a child or an adult, black or white, Einstein or not inventor style. And so how involved have you been in kind of the creation of those stimuli?
So it's always been a discussion with lab members, and always, of course, with Professor Slater, who's very good at coming up with great ideas. And thanks to the projects I've been involved all these years, I've had the opportunity to really work on this area and this discipline, and bring to life some of the ideas that might be very small at the beginning, and then when you start talking with people, you end up doing something quite big. So it's a little bit of a mix what I'm doing. I'm basically involved in all the different phases of an experience, from the concept of it, doing the experimental design, coming up with the idea or measures, then getting involved in the implementation from a technical point of view, and everything that follows after that.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. I lack those technical skills. And so I certainly, like you, am involved in the ideation process through the end, but I can't actually sit down with Unity or whatever engine we're using and make the thing. So I rely on my students and collaborators for that. So that's really wonderful that you've got the whole range of skills there to do research in this field.
It's interesting.
Are many so of all the labs, of all the VR labs that study this topic, the event lab, Mel Slater's lab in Barcelona, is the one that I maybe know least about in the day-to-day operations. I know the names and some of the people, but I just haven't spent time there. Whereas I don't know if I mentioned this to you, I'm actually in Menlo Park right now in the Bay Area, visiting. I'm teaching online still at Michigan State, but I see Jeremy on a regular basis, Jeremy Balanson. So I'm aware of who's doing what in this space. And of course, he's the one who brought me to the Proteus effect. And I know people in Singapore who are interested in the Proteus effect, a former postdoc of Jeremy's, Benji Lee. But the event lab, so I see all this awesome research, the Peck study on implicit racial bias was one of the first ones to hit my radar, and I realized, oh wow, they're doing awesome Proteus work in a different way than other people. So so could you tell me a little bit about the lab? What's it like working there? Does everyone have your amazing range of technical skills?
So we've always worked with people at the event lab come from different backgrounds. I guess like most VR labs. So we've had people before who were dedicated, mostly on psychology, maybe, or cognitive neuroscience. And then we also have the more technical team. But I must say that perhaps the majority of the members who have joined the lab so far have been combining both skills. So I think it's usually easier when you're coming from a technical background to bring the knowledge and then slowly start getting into the psychology field and the cognitive neuroscience and build on it, rather than the other way around. Although there are people who do love both parts of them, might be coming from a psychology background, but they like technical work and they are doing great on it. So yes, it's really been a combination of everything with all the members of the lab so far.
Okay, yeah, it's just such an amazing, productive and creative place. The research that comes out of that lab is certainly not just a simple incremental step toward, the obvious goal. There are very interesting creative approaches to the research. I met Mel in 2007 or 6 at the Barcelona Presence Conference. I forget exactly what it was. And he was just starting out there. And then I saw him one other time, but I haven't seen much of him, but I really admire the work there. So what's it like working with him? I mean, he's clearly very creative and willing to take risks and try new things, and funny. His titles are great. So yeah, what's it like working with Mel?
Yeah, it's great. Actually, I'm very grateful that I've had the chance to be studying with him and do my PhD with him. I certainly learned a lot on how to do good research. I know Mel has all these crazy ideas, but he's 100% dedicated to doing good research. And he's doing it well. I mean, I think that everybody knows. And he's also a very open person. So it's really nice talking with him and come up with ideas together, and always helps us take our idea a step further and make it more interesting, more exciting.
So what are some exciting projects on your plate right now?
So now we've been working as a team, the whole team, the members of the team were working on the ERC project that Mel got a couple of years back. That's called MOTIVE, and it stands for Moments in Time in Immersive Virtual Environments. The end goal of the project is to recreate a virtual concert scenario of a concert that took place in the past. We specifically tried to redo a Dire Straits concert scenario, a concert from back in '83 at Hammersmith Odeon in the UK, in London. And the idea, although the end goal is not really to take out a commercial project or anything like that, is just to use this as a platform to conduct research on all the interesting aspects of virtual reality, starting presence, place illusion, plausibility illusion, study body ownership, and see how we can go through the experience. Again, if we're talking about someone who has lived it in the past and would love to relive it, or if you didn't have the chance to attend back then, and now you finally can. And the idea is really to expand this on more scenarios, not just this one. So my colleagues are doing a lot of work on the computer vision side to replicate that as fast and easily as possible, so that we take the least amount of time to build it from a more artistic point of view, right? So we are not artists in the team. There are a lot of people who are dedicated to doing this work, and they're doing amazing work. But our goal is to do something more automated, let's say.
And so how did you choose this concert, Dire Straits, in the 80s? It seems like the participants will have to be at least 45 or 50 years old in order to really have an emotional connection to that.
So yeah, that again was one of Mel's ideas. He didn't have the chance to attend this concert when it took place, and since he missed the chance, he thought that it's never too late. He could still do it, and he came up with this wonderful idea of reconstructing the Dire Straits concert from back then.
Nice. And so what are some of your expectations there? People will, if they attended, they have a nostalgic connection, or even if they didn't, I think Nell has nostalgia for the music, the time period, the event. So what will you measure? Are there any independent variables in the scenario, or is it just put people in the environment and measure?
So no, we do have a lot of studies. Like I mentioned before, really, we use it as a platform to study all these concepts of virtual reality. So we do address presence, for instance, what it takes to make you feel like you are really in this concert scenario, and taking also into account whether you have been there before or it's the first time.
But everyone will. Oh, sorry to interrupt. But no, everyone will have the same concert experience, or will some people be like in the front row, or other people floating in space, or is there something?
Yes, we do play with all these variables. There are many things that you can manipulate there to change the experience. But of course, one of the positive of virtual reality is that you can attend the concert scenario. You can also be in the front row, or you can be on the stage with the band. You can perform with the band, right? Or maybe, you see yourself as a member of the band, not just as a spectator, right, from your seat. So you can engage with the group and with those around you. So we're trying to address all these factors and aspects.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Okay, so that's a project that is not quite a Proteus effect project. So do you have any Proteus effect research that you're excited about currently, either in a later phase, like closer to publication, or in the ideation also?
So, for instance, I guess that at this point, the closest research perhaps I can relate to the Proteus effect is the latest racial bias study that we did, which was not in the context of the concert scenario, but that's a future step, perhaps let's say it. And where we basically found that both the type of the body you have in virtual reality, but also the social context that's depicted in the virtual scenario, both play a role in how your implicit bias is modulated. So in just a few words, we showed that whereas, as it has been shown before, under neutral and positive experiences, there can be a reduction of your implicit bias. Then in negative situations, this might lead to the opposite effect. There might be an increase. Meanwhile, in a different study where we do use our concert scenario in a way, we address action in groups and how those around you can affect your own behavior. And we're doing it in a group walking scenario inside a virtual theater, where we manipulate the appearance of those around you to be either in a group or an out group. And then we're measuring synchrony with those around you, and metronome that we have in theater, and so on. So it's it's just bringing different studies together, not necessarily related to the concert scenario. But again, like I said before, we're using this as a platform to study different ideas that we have.
Sure. So I've always found this topic very interesting, embodying a darker or lighter skin avatar, and then measures of implicit bias. The first study on this was, I think, Victoria Groom and Jeremy Bailenson and maybe some other authors, and it was a job interview scenario, and they found that using a darker skin avatar made you more biased. But then there were some other studies. The Peck study I mentioned found the opposite of that. A darker skin avatar reflected less bias, and then subsequent studies have found less bias. So it sounds like this recent study you're describing tries to tease apart the reasoning for why the disparity between those findings. Are you referring to is this the Royal Society Open Science paper?
Yes, that's correct. And the idea behind it was exactly that whereas in the studies that we've done at the lab and in some other labs, we've seen this reduction in implicit bias. This first study reported by Groom, there was this increase. And of course, the idea, the thought was that since it was a negative social situation, it's also linked to racial discrimination and other sorts of discrimination, it might have affected implicit bias in this negative direction. And that's why we did this new setup to try to separate, these factors and see how bias is modulated. But of course, there's a lot more work to be done in this direction. It's not conclusive. And
sure. But now based on your understanding of those findings and the kind of general area of research, what would you say is useful, let's say, for gamers? They're going out into virtual worlds and they're, at their consumer virtual reality systems, and they're hanging out with people. Maybe they're running around like Fortnite, but in VR, in avatars, shooting each other. What recommendations would you have for developers or the users themselves to reduce racial bias or gender bias, if there are crossovers here, in terms of how they choose their avatars?
Right. So it's a complicated question, and I don't know if there is a simple answer to that. And of course, gaming is not my background, and I haven't done any studies with gamers. I know there are people who dedicate to research on that, so I cannot really speak for them. But based on what we found so far, and the fact that we cannot yet generalize the findings to the entire population because there are cultural and other differences, and these need to be taken into account. So our findings, or maybe the findings of some others might be quite different when you run the study in Spain or in Europe, or you go in the US or even within the US, right? There are a lot of differences. So we do not know how our findings generalize to draw some conclusions like that of what you should or should not do. And the other aspect is that in these cases, we're talking about implicit bias, and we have yet to understand how this translates to behavior. So being implicitly biased does not mean that, you have some negative behavior towards somebody else. If we're talking about racial discrimination in this case, then it's racial discrimination. Your behavior might still be the same. It's just that your implicit bias towards this person that is modulated, and that's unconscious, right? You can't do anything about it. It's not going to show, but it might also show, and that we don't know. We really need to do more research in determining that, and then maybe we can say whether we need to have a specific line to follow how something should be designed, especially when it comes to the gaming industry and so on.
Sure.
So
okay. So that's gaming. I get it. Certainly context matters. Even some of the basic way people respond to in-groups and out-groups, though that's maybe a universal classification, those things might differ based on context too, based on your experiences with in-groups and out-groups. So with that caveat in mind, I'm going to pose a hypothesis to you, and I'd like you to tell me what you think. The new context, not gaming. How about Zoom calls? We're in this new era of remote work. People will be meeting with their teams post-pandemic, probably regularly through Zoom. And we know there's a high level of Zoom fatigue or virtual meeting fatigue. We know that it affects women to a disproportionate amount than men, and also people of color, at least in certain contexts. And so one solution that I think is really exciting is to use avatars in Zoom, right? You're not yourself, you're kind of depicted in a way that maybe masks the stereotyped identity characteristics. But then I worry that if you are all avatars, then you're not representing yourself exactly as you are. Does that mean that we kind of regress to the mean? Does that mean that we all try to look homogenous in order to look good for our boss? So I won't pose a hypothesis, but I would like to ask you to speculate. I know certainly more research is necessary, but based on your instinct, how would you suggest that these corporations or companies or organizations kind of set up guidelines for using avatars in the workplace in a technology like this, like a Zoom call?
Okay, so very interesting. And as a matter of fact, a few weeks back, or might be also a month, you just lose track of time when you're spending your whole time indoors, really. We had a very interesting panel discussion with Mar Gonzalez Franco from Microsoft and Timoni West from Unity on the use of avatars and the future of virtual representation and virtual environments or online representation and so on. So we sort of discussed these ideas and what we foresee happening. And again, there's a lot of research going on in this domain with scientists trying to see how virtual representation, even if we're talking about avatars in Zoom meetings, can be employed in different contexts, either within the same company or across different disciplines at different companies. So, for instance, and again, I don't know if there are going to be guidelines really of how you can do this, because just to pose a very simple example, it has been found before that sorry, I forgot to mention in our panel discussion Veronica from Portugal. She's excellent in doing avatar research in avatars. There's
I'm sorry, what's her last name?
Veronica Orvallo.
Okay, got it.
Veronica, sorry if you hear me. I cannot pronounce
No problem.
surname. She's the founder of Didimo. They're doing excellent work on avatars for quite a few years now. So it has been shown, for example, that when you're working in teams where they have to do a lot of work on design, imagine you have a car model you have to go over, right? Or they're engineers and so on. And when you employ a virtual representation, it might not work as well because you don't want somebody obstructing the view all the time. So you just want maybe little heads floating around in the environment so you can talk to each other and get the main concepts, and you can always have a clear view of your model, okay, because you need to take joint decisions. But then you might have other cases where you need to express some ideas or emotions to co-workers, and then you end up wanting a more precise virtual representation, one that you can add facial animations to, so you can express all these emotions and so on. And that's a different aspect of it. And then, of course, whether people are going to opt for choosing a lookalike virtual representation, so basically themselves, right, in VR or as an avatar online and so on, or whether they're going to opt for one that is hiding the real identity. Again, I don't know if there are going to be like strict guidelines for that, where we want to see others being what they look like in reality, or that's going to be up to them because maybe they want to change this representation. And in cases where they do not have the chance to do it in real life, maybe this is how they would like to do it in the virtual and online world. And can you really take that away from them? I don't think so. But there are a lot of different components involved in that, and we do know so very little about it. But maybe the last year has made us more open towards thinking in this direction, what's really going to happen. And yes, I don't know. It's a complicated question. I think there will have more things coming up, especially if we continue with this situation and locked inside.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've gone from virtual concerts to avatars in the workplace, both the informal and the formal. You're doing amazing work, Domna. I didn't want to take more than 30 minutes of your time. So just with the last question here, what is one burning research question that you think is really exciting that you'd like to pursue that you haven't started a project on yet?
A burning one. I can't tell if I have one like that. I certainly have a lot of ideas that are around the same concept of body representation, because there are so many questions still to be answered. And sometimes we just aim at doing something that's very new, something that's going to make the difference. But then we really need to drill down into the specifics and the details of that in order to be able to better understand what's happening. So yeah, I think that this is more important to me at the time. And taking as an example the racial bias studies, I would really love to understand better what is really going on there. What are the mechanisms that lead to these results? We know nothing about it. It's just whatever we've seen online. But for example, there are so many studies that can be done at the neural level to get to understanding what's really going on there. And we're still lacking studies in this domain. So that's exciting, and I'm sure more people Yes,
Yeah,
would
and
love to.
it's certainly a topic worth both replicating and extending. You know,
Yes,
the
exactly.
first study really set us off on some confusing thinking at first, but you followed it up and you've helped clarify that issue, and you've done amazing work, and you've volunteered your time today for the podcast. So thank you so much for all of those
Thank
things.
you. Thank you.
Domna,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
great chatting with you. And I hope we have the chance to meet each other at some point in
absolutely.
physical.
I'd love to visit Barcelona. It's on my to-do list. All right, I'm going to stop the
Wonderful.
recording. So thank you
Thank you.
everyone for listening.